the Bespoke Parenting Hour with Julie Gunlock and Cam Edwards.
Hey, Cam. How you doing?
I am good. Julie, how are you?
I'm doing great. Merry almost Christmas.
Merry almost Christmas, yes. How's everything going? Is all the Christmas prep work on schedule at your house?
I'm so glad we're going to talk about this because I want to brag. I am so shockingly prepared this year. I don't know what's happened. I mean, I'm probably going to get fired because, because I don't know, I've been baking along with, in the middle of the day along with doing my work, but because I do work from home, so it's easy to do. But I have almost all of the presents wrapped. I'm not quite done with the shopping, but I have done probably 80% of the shopping, and those presents are wrapped. And under the tree, which is already set up, all the decorations are out. And I've made 4 different kinds of Christmas cookies, which are all frozen. They're in the freezer. They're ready to come out Christmas Eve. I've made 2 appetizers, mini crab cakes and gougères, which are sort of cheese puffs. Those are in the freezer, ready for Christmas Eve. So I am set. I'm doing great. I've already got my whole menu. I host Christmas and Christmas Eve. We have some friends as well as family come over, and we have a big dinner. And my mom helps with the cooking, but I host, and then I host Christmas morning as well. So anyway, yeah, I'm very ahead of the game. How are you all?
Well, we're not that good, I'll tell you that. So the tree is up. That's good. I think last year it was December 23rd before the tree was put up. So the tree is up. The ornaments are on. Yeah. Last year was bad. We were doing better than last year. There are a couple of presents under the trees. I'm mostly done shopping for everybody, but we haven't started our prep work for Christmas dinner. So, my wife, this is a question for you, Julie. Do you have the standard, like, traditional Christmas dinner? Do you experiment? Do you do things differently every year? Do you change it up at all at Christmas?
Yep. We are sort of a change it up. Last year, we sometimes do a really traditional Christmas dinner. Sometimes we do turkey or ham. This year, we're actually doing ham. But last year, I made braised short ribs with a gorgonzola polenta, which was horrible because it was 80 degrees out, and everybody was sitting there sort of sweating, eating this braised short rib, which if you're familiar with braised short ribs, I mean, they have to cook for like 3 hours in a low oven. So it was pretty brutal. This year, I think and of course this year we're going to have, like Siberian winds coming down, and but we're making a ham. I bought a 23-pound, I'm not kidding, a 23-pound ham.
Wow.
Huge, whole ham. And I'm going to be making that with a glaze and just traditional stuff. So what do you guys do? Now, it sounds like you probably change it up a little bit.
So Thanksgiving is always the traditional Thanksgiving dinner, and then Christmas is the holiday where my wife gets to experiment. So we are doing a goose this year.
Wow.
Yeah, a Christmas goose. We have a friend who is giving us one of her geese. And then we're going to do goat kebabs.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Obviously one of your
and perhaps goat gyros as well, yes. We've got some goat meats that we've got to do something with. So we're going to do goat kebabs, gyros, and a Christmas goose.
That is a very interesting menu there. That's a little bit of little Greek, right? A little traditional American. I will tell you this. I actually I've watched someone make a goose. And I will warn you, it is quite fatty. Apparently this bird is very fatty.
Oh, yeah.
So, maybe because yours is raised and, probably sounds more like maybe it's more lean, but I hear that it is a fatty bird. Have you heard that?
I think even when they're like free-ranging, I think that it's just a naturally fattier bird than a chicken or a turkey. It'll be something interesting. I imagine it will not be as complicated as when we did the turducken a couple of years ago.
Cannot believe you did that.
It was amazing. It was so good.
We have really ended up sort of having real traditions. I mean, it took a while, but for the last several years, my mother is French-Canadian heritage. She grew up in a very French-Canadian enclave in New Hampshire, and big French-Canadian family. And we've adopted a lot of the traditions that my mom had growing up. And so we do a very traditional sort of French-Canadian Christmas Eve dinner with something called tourtière. Cam, have you ever had tourtière?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I bet
tourtière?
Elaine would make a mean tourtière. It's a pork pie. It's a double crust pie shell that's stuffed with basically ground pork that has allspice and cloves and onion. No cinnamon. It's just allspice and cloves. It has a very sort of Christmassy smell to it. And you stuff this pork into a pie shell. Now, my mom also makes this thing called cuctons, which is a sort of a ground pork spread. Now, in my grandmother's day, when she made it, the pork was much fattier. Today in the grocery store, they have very lean pork. And what was left, when you would make this spread and you'd put it in these little bowls and you'd refrigerate them, because you cook it and then you grind it up and you put it in this bowl, the fat would rise to the top, this white layer of fat. And my mom said that her grandparents used to fight over the fat. They would spread the fat on the bread. Now when my mom makes it, obviously it's very lean, so it's just sort of it's like a pork spread. They call it sort of like poor man's pâté, because it's not really pâté, it's sort of ground pork. So we have all of that. So it's a very, very pork-heavy Christmas Eve for our family.
I approve. I approve of the pork-heavy Christmas. When you said a French-Canadian Christmas Eve, my thought immediately went to poutine. Do you do poutine at all?
No, we do not do poutine, which is sort of street food. The pork pie is actually quite lovely.
It's fries and gravy and cheese. I mean, that's just amazing.
It is, but it's like Chinese. Americans are like, oh, it's a Chinese American Christmas. You're going to have kung pao chicken. There's four French Canadian dishes, and you're just thinking every French Canadian makes poutine on Christmas Eve. No, I mean there are other French Canadian meals and I don't think poutine is like a traditional Christmas item up in French Canada. But
would be at my house.
But tourtière definitely is, and it's very pretty and it's easy. It's a nice thing to make. Sort of, you assemble the pies ahead of time and freeze them, and then you go to mass, you come home, you stick them in the oven. It only takes about half an hour to warm up. Anyway, it's very, very nice tradition that we have.
Well, speaking of Canadians, since we're like 10 minutes in, we haven't even talked about kids. We can just go kid-free for this episode of the Bespoke Parenting Hour if you want.
Let's talk about food.
But right. But speaking of Canadians, Alan Thicke died.
I know. Oh my gosh! I know. This is
the quintessential Canadian dad.
Yeah, let's tell our listeners. For the few who do not know, Alan Thicke was on Growing Pains. It was a 1980s very popular series in the 1980s with Kirk Cameron and who else was on? I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio got his start. Tracy Gold. Again, Leonardo DiCaprio got his start on Growing Pains in later episodes. But yeah, so Alan Thicke, the sort of younger generations now might know Robin Thicke, who's a singer. But Alan Thicke he was sort of like, he was sort of like Bill Cosby level dad, just the sort of all-American kind of goofy dad on Growing Pains. So yeah.
Yeah, he was the Ward Cleaver of the 80s. That's right.
Well, tell us about Ward Cleaver. I love the Ward Cleaver stuff in your book. Let's give a plug to your book. While we're talking about great dads, great sort of iconic American dads, I don't think you've ever talked about your book on the show.
Presents.
Yeah, exactly.
Heavy lifting, grow up, get a job, start a family, and other manly advice. Jim Garrity of National Review and I wrote this book, came out last year. It's still getting talked about, actually, which is pretty cool. There was a Australian legislator who had it on his Christmas reading list I saw a couple weeks ago. Yeah, and Jim just did a piece for Prager University on Ward Cleaver. And Ward Cleaver was just... And Alan Thicke's character on Growing Pains was the same way. They were just sort of the solid characters, right? Like they weren't out there being outrageous. They weren't out there trying to get attention. It wasn't all about them. But if a kid needed something, if the family was falling apart, they were the glue that held it all together, right? And they were just kind of quiet. They went about their days, but they were solid. They were just solid. And, I mean, I remember growing up watching Growing Pains. That was the big show, and I was probably 10 or 11. I remember when Leonardo DiCaprio appeared as the Cousin Oliver character, in the waning days of Growing Pains. What can we do to freshen up the show? Let's put a new kid in there, and it was Leonardo DiCaprio, right? It was one of those, dare you say, wholesome shows.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look back, and it wasn't. It wasn't. Let's examine this fatal flaw in this character this week. I mean, I watched. Shows like Modern Family, I watch those and they're funny, and I am amused, but they're all human train wrecks. Every character is a train wreck.
Every single, and I'm so glad you bring that up. I mean, one thing that's really nice about Growing Pains, and a lot of shows, the one with Michael J. Fox, what's wrong with me?
Family Ties.
Family Ties, thank you. Look, they occasionally, even, and other shows, not just the comedies, like Little House on the Prairie, most of the time, 90% of the time, these were just entertaining shows, lighthearted entertaining shows. And occasionally, I remember on Family, it might have been Family Ties, where the best friend, the goofy best friend, gets hooked on some sort of speed or something like that. It's so that he can study harder, right? Or maybe it was Michael J. Fox's character, right? And then I remember there was a serious episode in Little House on the Prairie about sexual assault, and so occasionally they really took on these big social issues, but not every week, okay? And
no, in fact, those were the very special episodes, right?
Yes,
on a very special episode of Different Strokes.
Right, where your parents,
Arnold has to deal with a child molester, right? Yeah, exactly. But it was, and that was a real episode too.
I know. I'm not laughing at that.
But it was.
Awkward laughter. Awkward laughter.
Yeah. But it was always sort of separated, right? So, and as a kid, you watch and you know very quickly, oh, this is a very special episode. This is they're not going for the laughs here, right?
Yeah. I mean, everybody. It seems like we all. There was something to aspire to, like Alan Thicke's character, Bill Cosby's character. Obviously, Bill Cosby, kind of a lightning rod these days, but as his character Huxley, Dr. Huxtable. Again, Alan Thicke's character, even the father on Family Ties, even though he was, Michael J. Fox's character was supposed to be the really stable one, where his parents were the hippies and sort of a little bit crazier. But they were still really stable parents, good parents. There were family dinners, there was normalcy, there was a schedule, and these were things that were, I think, the other thing, I know this is a little bit shallow, but the other thing I always noticed about these shows, the dads were always dressed really well. They always looked tidy. I loved that about. I had, my dad was an engineer, and it wasn't a suit and tie kind of job. I mean, he would go to the plant, and and I mean, he had to look nice, but he didn't have a suit and tie. And I remember always being impressed with these dads who had collared shirts and sweaters and sort of creased pants. I don't know why that really always impressed me, but again, there was just this just civility about these dads that I always admired, and again, even though there were this very special episodes, and I remember, you're right about that, my parents we'd have to have a conversation before we watched the show.
Right.
But not every episode was some sort of, moment for a social justice lesson or, let's talk about the progress of our society. It was just lighthearted fun most of the time. And that's really changed, I think, in television today.
I think it has too. I mean, I think now, you just look at, again, whether it's shows like Modern Family or, movies like Ms. Sloane, we are just getting beat over the head with messages, right, from Hollywood. But, you had started to say something about how Alan Thicke died. And I want to talk about that for a second because, he was 69, which is way too young.
Yeah.
But he had a heart attack while he was playing hockey with one of his sons.
Yep.
And when I saw that last night, I thought to myself, man, if you've got to go, doing something you love with someone you love is a pretty good way to go, right?
Yeah. I guess.
I mean, I don't know. I felt a little bit better about that, at least he died doing, with people that he cared about, doing something that he loved. It could be a lot worse. He had a good life. I think he was gone too soon, but
this is like a very interesting and very.
This is a very special episode of the parenting.
I'm going to go cry. I don't know about that. It's interesting. No, I do really mean it. This is a really interesting conversation and a really interesting kind of debate. Like, do you want to go suddenly? And I don't know that it was suddenly. I mean, he was transported to a hospital, so I mean, he might not have I don't know that he dropped dead. I don't know. It was heart failure. They're saying it was a heart attack, and usually you don't. You can still be somewhat lucid. But I don't know. There's just something interesting about that. I just imagine there was a lot unsaid, and there was a lot left to be done. And so, it's. I think sudden death like that is just. There's just so many things you might want to say. Gosh, we should move off this. I think people are probably turning off their radios at this point. I'm about to start crying, but I do think I understand your point.
Men and women that you're talking about. All of the things that were left unsaid and undone, and leaving the family in the lurch.
This is the real reason. I have told my husband, if I am on life support, you can unplug me, but I have to be down to a size 6 before you do. And I want to thoroughly plan my funeral. So I am so worried that someone will decide to cover my casket in carnations, or put me in a really hideous dress for eternity. So I have these worries, and so perhaps maybe that is a gender specific thing. I'm also a planner. I like things very planned out, and I like to. Yeah, so man,
I'm more of the wing it type. So I'm just that's at least he was with somebody he liked, and it wasn't like hanging out with Hollywood agents or something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just the eternal optimist. Maybe I'm the sunshiny optimist. But it is sad to see Alan Thicke pass away. In 2016, it's just been like every year we've seen celebrities pass away. But boy, it seems like this has just been a really, really rough year.
I don't know. I will tell you this. Are you familiar with the Holderness family? I think I'm saying that right. They're sort of. I cannot believe this actually occurs, that this happens, but they are YouTube celebrities. You've heard of these people who have their own channels and make millions of dollars. I'm a moron. Why I didn't figure this out earlier. But apparently people make millions of dollars by posting videos on YouTube. So there's a family I think they're called the Holderness family. They are hilarious. They're a family of 4, and they do these funny videos and sort of music videos, and they changed the words and they did this review of 2016 that was all the positive things that came. So I would suggest everybody check out the Holderness family, their latest Christmas video on the good things that happened in 2016. Unfortunately, none of them are coming to mind at the moment. But when I was watching this, I can only think of the bad things. But when I was watching this video, I was like, "Oh, that's true. That's good. That's good. That's another good thing that happened." So there is some apparently there are some good things, like the Cubs winning, right? There were a couple things like that that were good news at least for Chicagoans.
Well, from my mind, Hillary Clinton losing was probably the best thing that could have happened in 2016.
Right,
right. It was kind of nice, We got a puppy.
Yeah.
There are some bright things to look at, but
right.
I don't know. It was also kind of a wretched year in a lot of regards, and it's okay. Maybe 2017 will be better.
There's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt about
wreck, I suppose. It could be a lot worse, but I'm going with, again, the 2017 will be better.
2017 will be better. And honestly, look, there's no doubt about it. You had stories this year, obviously, after Trump's win of, grandparents not allowing their or parents not allowing the grandparents to see the kids, and friendships ending, and and let's not forget, some pretty spectacular violence post-election from disgruntled Hillary Clinton supporters or just paid-for activists. So it's been there's no doubt about it. It's been a tough year, but I do think in general it's what Trump has been doing so far has been, I think his cabinet picks are, I mean, I know this is a parenting podcast and we're getting into politics here, but I think his cabinet picks are positive. I think there's been some positive signs. And even though it is a parenting podcast, look, I have been afraid for my children's future for a long time. So I think it is appropriate that we're talking about this. But I think that for a lot of parents out there, this is time for hope. And I certainly think that for people who have struggled in this economy, who have been underemployed or unemployed, this is a moment for some hope. And they haven't had hope for a lot of years. So I think this is, hopefully, we're going into 2017 a bit more positive.
I hope so. Now, obviously, there's still crazy stories out there. And those will continue in 2017. You sent me a story earlier today. The dad who was arrested outside of a 7-Eleven, right?
Yeah.
Left his 15-month-old in the car for
11 minutes.
A matter of minutes.
It was 11 minutes. This is the kind of story that reminds me of my own experience with this, where I got harassed because I left my kids in the car for 15 minutes, and they're older. This was a 15-month-old, and so, you can imagine sort of people going, oh, it's a baby, but it was obviously it was cooler outside. They said the car was running, but the heat wasn't on, which, this guy, you can't win, right? If he had left the heat on, they would say, oh, it would have gotten too hot in there and the baby would have died of heat. So, the car was likely already warm. And then, so again, it's 11 minutes. And there's another case, which Lenore actually writes about, where some parents left their baby in the car, who was sleeping in the car. They turned the car off. They went into Lowe's for about 15 minutes or 20 minutes. They let their son wait in the car for 20 minutes while they went into Lowe's to get Christmas lights. He was a 4-year-old, okay? When they came back out, the firefighters had smashed the window to extricate the boy, okay? As if the car had been on fire. That's what Lenore writes, as if the car had been on fire. Then Lenore writes, this is all on Lenore Skenazy's website, Free Range Kids, and I love to check her website and see what the latest craziness is. She posts something once every couple days. She says, then despite the fact that the kid was fine, they rushed him to the hospital in an ambulance and threw the dad in jail, okay? Now, let's talk about what's more traumatic for the kid, right? He wakes up, his parents aren't there. I'm sure they've done this before, and I'm sure the kid sort of knows. I mean, my kids know, like, hey, when I leave them in the car, if they fall asleep and they wake up, they're going to be, oh, Mom went in the store again without us. They know this, right? But let's say the kid didn't know. Okay, so he wakes up, he's crying. He cries for 5 minutes. Okay, fine. Maybe it's not that ideal, but is handcuffing your dad in front of you and then calling an ambulance and whisking you off to the hospital to be checked out with your mother who's crying. I mean, which one is more traumatic, right? There's just absolutely no common sense. No common sense. So, in both cases, this continues to happen.
It does. And, it's funny. Last weekend, I was out with my youngest, who were 11, and we had to go to Walmart for something, and neither one of them wanted to come in. And I didn't even think about it. I just said, okay. And as I'm inside Walmart, I'm thinking, uh-oh, right? I had that moment of, oh, man. Yeah. Oh, man. But I forgot. I live in the real world. And this, it was fine. Nobody said anything. I came out. All my windows were intact. There was no jaws of light being used on my vehicle to extricate my 11-year-old. But you can't help but wonder about these things now. And it's always, if you're not thinking about it right away, again, you're going to have that realization at some point of, what's going to happen here? When it comes to the 4-year-old, look, were some bad decisions made? Probably so. If you've got two parents there, maybe one of them stays in the car, the other one goes into Lowe's. But does it rise to? But again, does it rise to an arrestable offense?
Right.
No.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing. We can make mistakes as parents without being arrested. As a matter of fact, we have to be able to make mistakes as parents without the fear of being arrested, because otherwise nobody's going to want to have babies. Right?
That's right.
Every time you make a mistake, every time you screw up in the slightest bit, or you say, I could have done that differently, but you're making that realization from a jail cell, look at that. I mean, that is going to freak people out to the point where they say, forget it, it's not worth it. We already
Right.
have, I think, a lot of people who say it's not worth it to have kids. I have to give up too much of my freedom in my life. To now, over-criminalize parenting, I think that is just, I think it's awful for our culture and society.
Yeah, the idea that mistakes or lapses in judgment are responded to with the fire department showing up and can you imagine how scared that kid was when he has a firefighter saying, cover your eyes, we're going to bash the window in, and then arresting the dad, and then calling an ambulance? I mean, like, what? I mean, if the point here is to look out for the kid, how is that looking out for the kid? Okay, I mean, first of all, you can jimmy. You can, they could probably figure out a way, or they could have gone into the Lowe's, right, and made a call, right, or something. I mean, look, it is so insane how they handled that situation, and and not only that, but then you have the dad goes in for 11 minutes, leaves his baby, and he's arrested. I mean, now that baby, who knows where that baby probably woken up, startled, right, and then is taken away from his dad because he went in for 11 minutes, a 15-month-old. Yeah, look, it's just the most offensive thing. And also, I don't think it is a bad decision to leave a 4-year-old in the car while you run in the store. Cars are locked now. Do we really think that someone's going to? First of all, and most cars, if these are, I bet this was a minivan with tinted back windows. Okay, I mean, I don't know for sure, but Lenore Skenazy does this great routine. If you've ever seen her talk in public, she gives this speech, which is, first of all. It's like going to a nightclub. She's a comedian. She is so funny, right? And so she gives this routine where she talks about how, I don't want to steal her routine here, but she talks about how she is home one day and a neighbor says, I can't believe what happened to me. I was at this grocery store and this woman says, will you watch my kid? I have to run down this aisle. I forgot something. And Lenore was saying her friend was just appalled that this woman would do it. So what Lenore does is she's so brilliant. She does this whole routine where she like this, because her neighbor says, I could have stolen this woman's child. So Lenore sort of takes that and runs with it, right? She explains what would have to occur for this to actually happen, right? So she makes all these jokes about how, she grabs the kid's crying, she's running out. Oh, what do I do with my groceries? Because, her friend is in the aisle with her own, groceries. And she's like, oh, I guess I'll abandon the groceries. And she runs out to the car, the kid's still wiggling and screaming. And then she realizes, oh, I don't have a car seat. So she runs back in, she buys a car seat, all to kidnap this kid, right? It's so absurd, right? And the point she's making is when that woman said, can you watch my son? She looked at the woman ahead of her. She looked like a nice lady, not drooling or and she made this judgment, and that's fine. We've just lost all reasonableness when it comes to parents making decisions that are reasonable. I really don't. I know this sets me apart from most parents, but I don't think it's terrible to leave a sleeping kid in the car while you go into a store. I mean, I will admit, 20 minutes is a long time too, but maybe these parents know their kid sleeps for a solid 2 hours, never wakes up every day. I mean, it's these parents know this child, and they might know that the kid doesn't freak out if they wake up and they're by themselves. So I think that we are, again, the offense doesn't match the reaction in either case, arresting these parents, essentially leaving these kids, traumatized. But again, I think we're just too hard. I mean, I've said this a million times on the show. It's not news. I think we are just too hard on parents nowadays for making what used to be totally reasonable decisions.
I would agree. And, look, I mean, we can disagree. I probably would not leave the kid in the car for 20 minutes. But again, those are parental judgments, right? Those aren't crimes.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the difference between being a legal parent and all of a sudden being a criminal parent. Now, speaking of trauma, Julie, on a slightly lighter note, so I had one of those parental firsts this week. You ready?
I'm ready.
My 16-year-old got his first hickey.
No. And I can't believe you're talking about this. I cannot believe you're talking about this.
Oh, I'm going to.
Oh, my God.
Of course I'm going to talk about it.
I cannot believe. Oh, my.
Podcast.
I'm sweating. I'm sweating. Just the even thought of that. I'm fairly certain this is either a hot flash or an anxiety attack. I'm going to go with anxiety attack because I can't deal with this. Are you serious? Oh.
I am serious. Yes. So, 16-year-old. He's been friends with this girl. We're not dating, right? And that's been the line. Just friends. But I could tell he kind of likes her, and apparently she kind of likes him too. Right. And so when he comes downstairs and he's got this hickey on his neck that I noticed, I'm like, oh. So you guys are not just friends now. Well, this changes everything. So we're going to have to have some conversations. So, so I get to have the follow-up. Now, I've already had the birds and the bees discussion because you can't wait till the kid's 16 to have the birds and the bees discussion. But now I get to have the follow-up, the more in-depth birds and bees discussion. I know.
I'm so mature. I just said ew. I mean,
ew.
I'm really going to handle this well when it comes time. I mean, I've had the basic biological conversation with one, not all. I at first thought, well, he can just tell his brothers and I'm done. But I know I need to have the conversation with the other two. So I've had the very basic, yes, but I find the whole thing very difficult. I know that that I should be sort of more progressive and at ease with these things, but I bet I'm more the norm. I find this. Have you? And of course,
I think everybody is a little uncomfortable. I think people are a little uncomfortable talking about this with their kids because, first of all, it's a tradition of having these uncomfortable conversations. Do you remember your parents having this conversation with you? Did you ever have this conversation with your parents?
My mother, my sister, she was a very intelligent child and started asking questions very young, and where do babies come? Not weird questions, but where do babies come from? And she wanted specifics, and she wasn't she was like a dog with a bone, and so Mom got the book. Remember the book? At least the book in the 70s was two chubby people who they were chubby cartoon characters. Now they were naked, but I distinctly remember their tummies meeting. They showed a picture of them. They showed a picture of them, the man was on top of the woman, but their tummies met. It wasn't anything, they didn't show it. It was very sweet. I remember, it looked like two, it was
just
so
two bears. Just two big,
it was
hairless bears just rolling around.
It was and it was very non-sexual, but she read us the book and then left the book in our room. That was it. There was certainly no conversation about pleasure or love or sort of, and there was absolutely no sort of religious connotation. She didn't tie it to sort of us growing up Catholic or bring in any kind of Catholic doctrine into it it was just, there's the book and here's the nice little chubby people having sex, and that was it. And,
so was your husband really weirded out on your wedding night when you tried to rub his belly?
Look, when I was 13, I saw my first R-rated movie. Okay, so I was
do things.
I'm not. I was not totally clueless, but anyway.
Okay.
But yes, that was my and and now that I'm a parent, so in my teen years and obviously my early 20s, I thought, good God, she did a crappy job. But now I think she did a fine job, and I was
go look at the chubby people rubbing their bellies together. Here, kids, that's all you need to know.
I would
We'll talk again in 8 years.
Exactly. Then I'll show you an R-rated movie, and your education will be complete.
I see. That was basically how I learned. I did not get a book from my mom. So by the time I was old enough to think about these things, my parents were divorced, and my mom was raising us. And do you remember the Billy Joel song "Keeping the Faith"?
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a line in the Billy Joel song about a 6-pack of Trojans and my old man's aftershave. And me being a little kid, I thought Trojans were like a brand of soda, right? Because what else would you use a six-pack for? So I remember asking my mom, like, what are Trojans? And she got really red-faced, and she didn't want to say anything. My mom was the type of person, she wouldn't say the word fart. Fart was a curse word, right? It was pass, gas, or tooth. Like, that was, so I ask all of a sudden, here's a, Mom, what are Trojans? And she gets red-faced, she starts trembling, and she just kind of like blurts out, prophylactics. And I'm like, well, that doesn't tell me anything. I don't, okay, great. So now I know, from one word I don't know the meaning of to another that I don't know the meaning of. And my older brother was in the room at the time, and he's just laughing. And I look at him, and he goes, rubbers. And I still didn't know. I'm like, what?
Right.
I mean,
nobody's helping me.
Hookers were tow trucks. I mean, like, right, exactly. Like, why aren't you telling me this stuff? So, and that was basically it. That was the conversation that I had. My mom just, shuddering and going, prophylactics. And then it was like 2 or 3 years later, we had the health course in school. And my mom, I think, was so relieved that she didn't have to be the one talking to me about this, that instead I got to watch the, grainy early 70s sex ed film. I don't think they were chubby people. I think it was, I'm not sure. I think I've repressed that memory, as a matter of fact.
1970s grainy film. What was your school showing you?
It was a very progressive school. It was,
sounds really realistic.
It was something about, I don't know, it's something about the devil and Miss Jones. I can't remember. I don't know.
Oh, well.
It was a religious school, so.
I am just now at the point where my 7-year-old talks about a girl in his school that he likes. My 9-year-old seems totally unaware that they're girls, and my 6-year-old just likes to chase them and beat them up. So I think I'm at a normal phase with these three.
Oh, yeah.
Again, my kids are
curious,
and I don't want them to get older.
Well, I know. I'm sorry. It's going to happen at some point.
It's going to happen.
But I'll be curious, because I was really surprised. Like, my 16-year-old, when we first moved to the country and he started his new school, he was the exotic new student, right? And he looked a little bit like Justin Bieber. And so all of the 6th grade girls were Bieber. And he was really, like, he had shown no interest in girls whatsoever. And all of a sudden girls were showing interest in him. So he was kind of intrigued by that for about 6 months. And he was like, girls are weird. And showed no interest in dating or anything until very recently, until, this girl. So by the time I was 16, I mean, I got to tell you, I was dating. I had been dating for several years. So I guess maybe I was precocious in that regard. But I'm curious. I don't know if kids are maybe just dating later now.
There's a lot of research on this. Yeah, there's a lot of research on this, and there's a lot of kind of disturbing research as well. I mean, there's a lot of good news, like, teen pregnancy is way down, but then when you look at it, there's a lot of kids who are not having traditional sex anymore. They're, not the kind that results in babies being conceived. And so there's a lot of other, a lot of oral sex, and frankly, there's a lot of porn that boys are watching. And so, you see these good news stories like, oh, kids are, the teen sex or teen pregnancy is down, but then you dig in and find, well, there's some not so good news in there as well, and some potentially not so healthy habits being developed. So, there's a lot of research on this stuff, and it's hard to we would probably have to start our podcast on that issue rather than, I know we're hitting our time
limit to wrap it up. That's true.
But it is very interesting. But I don't think it's all just great news.
Well, see, another benefit for living in the country and having satellite internet, my kids cannot access internet porn because it would just take too long. It would be too slow. So I don't have to worry about that.
I think one thing that what would be interesting, and I am currently battling my children's school on this, is the issue of technology. I think that's one thing that we can talk about. I tend to be very nervous about it. Lenore, who is, she's sort of my touchstone on a lot of these issues, she actually says there's a lot of alarmism about it. And yet then there's other information talking about just how damaging technology is for kids and how susceptible to really sort of technological addiction kids can become. So it's a really interesting, I think, area of study. There's not a lot known at this point, but I certainly am more cautious. This is one area where I tend to be an alarmist. Funny enough, I tend to be very cautious on technology, and I think that's something that you and I could really get into.
You're a hickey alarmist too, I think. I think the day is going to come when
absolutely
5-alarm fire when you see that.
Get thee to a monastery.
Well, this has been kind of all over the place. I liked this podcast. I liked this episode.
I do too.
It was good.
All
right, well, listen, I'm really glad. Yeah, you like what?
No, go on.
No. Tell me what you like.
No, I do. I particularly like talking about food. I like talking. I think our post Christmas, because I think this will maybe our last podcast before, because maybe we'll do one next week. But we should do a thorough review of what was eaten and how the goose turned out.
That sounds good. And I may actually be up in the D.C. area the week after Christmas. So
good.
If I have any leftover like goat kebabs, maybe we could do a leftover swap.
That'd be great.
And I'll bring you some leftover goose maybe. And you can, if you've got any of the pork spread left over, I would love to try that.
Oh, you would love that. I really should try to set some aside for you, and maybe I'll ask my mom to freeze a small container of it, because I'd like you and Elaine to try it. I think that's something Elaine would especially like to make. And because you raise your own pork, you can probably get a fattier pork, and it could be the more traditional cocktones that my grandmother made. Anyway. We'll talk.
I tell you what, I've actually got some fatty pork in the freezer. If I could come up there and drop it off for you, I would give you the fatty pork so you could have the old-fashioned.
Oh,
what is it called again?
Cocktones. There's a much more French way of saying. I say toutière better, but I can't. My mother says cocktones with a French accent perfectly, and I can never do it. So I will not embarrass myself, but I call it cocktones. Cocktones, essentially. It's croton.
I'll just go with pork spread.
It's really croton.
Spread.
But there's this weird C that you have to do, this like guttural k that I can never do. But it's croton. It's very big up in the Northeast, in New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont. You don't see it down here. But yes, I will try to save you some.
All right. Well, I really enjoyed the conversation this week. Have fun with all of the kids. When do they get out for Christmas break?
Too soon. This is my last week of peace.
Ours have 3 weeks off for Christmas this year.
That's just
awful.
Stupid. Yes.
I know.
Nobody needs that long off. Okay, so I guess we might be back next week, and we will talk about that. But thanks again for chatting with me, Cam. It's always fun.
It is always fun. And thank you for tuning in to the Bespoke Parenting Hour podcast. And we will be back soon. Julie Gunlock and Cam Edwards, and we'll talk to you soon.